Sure it's live. All right, everybody, how we doing this afternoon? Welcome in, welcome in. Hello, Mike, D Jenny from the blockchain. I love that. Crypto hands, broke Oshi. See everybody. If one person just drop me just a one in the chat, just make sure that you can hear okay, and then we'll get started here. Okay, just double checking here, making sure you guys can hear me before we continue. Perfect. All right, D Jenny, D Jenny from the blockchain. All right, so Bitcoin coming to the end of June, coming to the end of the quarter, and just recently took out $100,000 over the weekend. So let's kind of break down, kind of the more local areas here, and then still going to look at the higher time frame, which to me still, points to a little bit more downside potentially, right? In the big key region that I've been looking to ever since we topped off at that $112,000 area. Hey, how you doing, everybody? Errol BLG, welcome in. And as soon as we came into that 112, which we've covered pretty much, pretty heavily at this point, and we're really really close to those areas. So the higher time frame idea here that's still pretty valid, right? This is something that can be invalidated, but I still kind of go towards the idea that we're going to see this sharp target area met. All right, and it may be as we kind of come into next month. So as we start July out, right? And this was pretty much the overall bigger picture. Covered this pretty much at exhaustion, like I said. Uh, this is something I was targeting all the way down when we took this low, right? Anytime we take a low like this and you start to make this little W formation, I'm always looking for a harmonic pattern, always looking for this sharp pattern specifically. We did the exact same setup right over here, right, with the completion zone up at 110 to 112. And then three major targets, one of which being here, second of which being there, the third one being like 86, $80,000. Very small version of this really big one now, right? So we got a real huge one here. It's right at the all-time highs. Realistically, it's not the most bullish thing in the grand scheme, but if we did come down to the major target, which is the 0.5 fib, yearly open area, I see a lot of people targeting this now, so it's a little not some by any means, but I think it might pierce a little bit lower there. The B point is a true blue secondary target of this overall area, and then realistically, it's these after that. But we come into this area here, it's kind of the make or break area for the reversal, right? So this is a huge bearish reversal setup that, in theory, could take us down pretty deep. But it has one one big area that changes that, and it's right here. All right. So you come down here. This turns this into what's known as the 5-0. Right, you get a 50% retracement. So the 5-0 is just based off the 50%, 0.5. And then instead of coming down to like the gold pocket, right, you front run that gold pocket a lot of times. Let's just see what that is. Might actually line up with the B point. Let's just P's and G's. Let's just see where that does line up. Oh, actually, it lines up right at the bottom of the box there. Yeah, right at the B point. So it is interesting uh, to note, right? So it is something that we'll be looking for, and more than anything, it's the B point of it. It's an untapped monthly pivot, so that's really where I've targeted that pretty heavily. Generally, we don't see the gold pocket hold on that, so that's just by itself wouldn't be the overall area I'd look to, but it is just a little bit more of confluence. Even when looking without this setup, a natural retracement to that area, is something we want to look to. So more so than anything, it's the B point, untapped monthly pivot. We're probably going to have another couple of pivots generate there, and then on top of that, like I said, and this once again, I'm kind of looking at a little higher time frame here, probably into the next few weeks to start off. I'll get into the shorter time frame stuff here in a minute. We're just coming into our weekly targets, which are right here. So we'll take a look at that here as we get everything going. Let's turn that off now. And just remember what we were talking about this basically this region right here, like that 88,000, 90,000, as far as that big area there. And something to note now is that we're coming into the end of a few different ranges as well, right? So we've got the first 6 month range out of the year. All right. You can see our shark target yearly open pretty much right there at the bottom. So this range closes off in about 9, 10 days, right at the end of June. So, and with us trading within the middle of it, I think it's quite likely that we at some point do rotate it. All right. So even if we push back up around the highs again and come back down a little bit into the beginning of July, maybe August time, uh, this one I could see that still taking place and coming down to that area. Okay. On top of that, let's just look at our new quarterly range as well. That's going to close off. Also, the same deal, pretty much trading at the highs here. Low side of that does come down right around the shark targets. Right? Um, so yeah, I think it's likely we make our way down to this region. All right. Could it be this week? Could be. Very well could do something along these lines where we roll down into this region here, and then next quarter, next 6 months, we have that big old range above us. Gives us a nice range to run as we run into the next 6 months of the year, the next quarter of the year. So something to look to there. All driving from the original bear setup with target zones down in there. So I think there's a lot of reasoning to look to this 88,000 towards about 93 for the next best. I always call it like the fresh entries. If I was looking to make any additional real deal, buy the dip areas in altcoins, in Bitcoin. Obviously, you can simply look to Bitcoin on this, and Bitcoin came into this region. The altcoins will obviously take a hit, but they get in a place where more than likely they'd be at major support as well, right? So sometimes I don't even look at the altcoin charts when we have big drops like this in Bitcoin, which would overly or in total be like 20%. It's not the large drop we've seen. It's not even as large as what we got over here, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it's like 32%. Um, but that's how I view it. And it was the same similar situation to like back here in the end of the year. I'm sorry, yeah, as we came into Q4 last year. So this was when we started in October, and remember the beginning of that was like very pumptobery. Um, it was like right here, right? So we started off. This was the previous quarter, closed off. We were trading right here above the range. We actually came back in right into a naked point of control. Nice ABC correction right into it. And then we got that run right there, right? So when I was looking at this back here, the same rules applied. I was looking for big support and next key region on Bitcoin. I didn't even look to some of the altcoins. If there was something I wanted to pick up, like Ondo or Sui or Ethereum, I just picked them up on Bitcoin support, whatever they were at. Obviously, in a spot form, not necessarily in a big leverage position or anything like that. And that ended up being literally the low before we ran it up to $100,000, right? So for Bitcoin, got a little bit of a move over November time on the altcoins there. So that's the higher time frame idea, still pretty much in play. Not going to spend too much time on it there. Short term, though, for this week, what could we see, right? We had a conflict pretty much escalate over the weekend, and generally when we see that, second, yeah, generally when we see that occur, and as we open up on Monday, there's a little bit of panic, a little bit of fear as we roll into the times where the market reopens. It's always a tough one, right? When things like that occur when the markets are closed. And oddly enough, majority of the time, we actually get those bigger market moves when the markets are closed, just to cause that, like, get everybody on their toes. And while I do foresee a world where that still does tend to roll us over a bit, short term bounces along the way are what we're looking to, right? So it's Monday, right? So every week I'm looking at the previous week range. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So just like we were looking at those at the let me see what that in the chat. Hey, Alex O, Mr. Creep Toe is in the chat here. How we doing, everybody? Lebo Master says the audio is good. Thank you for that. Freedom of Crypto, what's up? Nano Watchman. All right. H Bardano bean. H Bardano, I like that. Will H bar do anything? We'll take a look. Obviously the altcoins are pretty much on life support here and waiting for Bitcoin to not shit the bed completely. But we'll definitely take a look. Does that mean if the shark harmonic materializes for altcoins for spot bag to go long, then and only go long on alts once we hit 93K on Bitcoin? Safe to assume. So the what I'm saying there is once again, if I was fresh into the market right now, right, or if I was like looking to take advantage of these recent drops, one thing I do want to point out is that we've been front running a ton of things. Okay. So in the way I trade or the way I approach the market, a lot of times I'm looking for really exact key levels. Obviously that's ideal for some entries, whether it's a short or long. But in the sense of spot, I'd really say in the attempts to not necessarily try to exactly time the bottom. Obviously, maybe you want to scale in as we're approaching those levels, just in case the exactly 93 doesn't get hit, or whatever, what have you, right? Maybe there's going to be a 10-20% window of altcoins there. But yes, the idea here is as Bitcoin approaches this region, that 93 down to 88, right? Uh, that's where I'd look to the altcoins at key support. And I'd never trade altcoins. I'm going to be honest with you on leverage for the most part. You will see it at times. It's like 1x or 2x, maybe a 1.5 if it's possible in some exchanges. And the altcoins are just too volatile. It's in my opinion. I don't think you can adequately, swing long them at least. Maybe catch some scalps, this and that. But I think for the most part, most people will lose their money if you're not already losing it on investing sometimes in the altcoins at times in the wrong periods. The leverage positions are really tough. But I do leverage trade and play with Bitcoin and Ethereum. Um, Occasionally Solana XRP, some more of the top pens. I throttle the leverage down to like 1-2x on those. And otherwise, anything I'm ever talking about in altcoin is the idea of it is spot, right? And that's my number one preach. I really don't advocate for everybody to go and utilize leverage. I think that most people do it incorrectly, and it's just too much stress for the average person. It's just not necessary. It's too much stress for even a trader, right? Like it's really tough for the altcoins. But yes, to answer your question, I would uh, look for altcoins. If you've been looking to pick something up when Bitcoin gets to this region, which once again, if it does, no guarantee it does, but if it does, that's just if I'm looking for the number one best area, the fresh entry, it's going to be there. It's about 15-13% from where we are now. So as we can all imagine, if we see something along those lines, the altcoins are not going to be feeling great. Otherwise, I'm allocated to whatever positions I'm in for now. I'm not really looking to add to anything unless we get down to there. If I'm wrong and we don't hit that and we just rock it out of here, then hey, happy with what I got, and we'll look for the next opportunities. All right, so short term here in the next coming days, right? And even if you want to like really trade on Bitcoin here, it's the same things I look for each and every week. Just short term moves. Not something I'm looking to heavily swing for weeks or months at a time. This is just a weekly setup. All right, so we've got our previous week low that we put in last night. We front ran the overall point of control. So once again, talking on just a lot of things getting front ran here. You got potential for this to be an ABC correction, and we can kind of run out of here. But I'm still kind of leaning into the idea that maybe we just push up into this region here, which is our weekly NPOC. So this is last week's range I'm pulling here. All right. And the relevance here is that generally what we see is last week's range is really relevant for this week. We tend to rotate those previous ranges as we begin the next session. So in this case, the session I'm referring to is whatever time frame I'm referring to. So this is last week's range. This week is very relevant. We look to see any kind of confluence areas and some key regions that would indicate why we'd maybe see this range rotated, or we would just look to some key levels here, which 2 weekly targets are the weekly pivot. That's last week's average. Basically, this week's target started off pretty much right around there, so it didn't really give us too much. Aside from now, it's our little bull or bear case for the week. So this is our like moving average of the week we want to see. If we're above it, it's bullish. If we're below it, we're bearish again. And as we're going into our range now of last week, it's likely we seek out our point of control at that point. And this is the highest volume node right here. So it's the highest amount of this is the biggest area where the most trades exchange hands, basically, right? So the price action is very likely to come back to that region, especially if it's untapped. So, AKA naked, and that's what the NPOC stands for. And that's simply just a point of control from either a range structurally or time based that is closed and has not had been retraced, right? So likely we revisit that not too far away from where we are now, right? If you were looking for a trade, earlier today, one of two options would have occurred. For me, I'm always looking to take that previous week low, especially because we would have came right into this point of control right here. Would have ideally looked to reclaim that area and take it up. All right. That was my initial idea there. The other one would be change of structure. Okay. So now we're just looking for originally when we came up to this level here, you got a local gold pocket, super short term. Right. You can see we came right into it. I'm sure my boy Alex O was all over that. And you got the bounce right off that, right? So now we've got our weekly pivot is hit. We're on our way most likely to the NPOC above that at 104,273. I'd like to say that there's a CME futures gap somewhere. Let's go look at that. Check the chat real quick one more time. Mr. Crypto. Yeah, my camera wasn't working. I don't know what it is. I think it died. So no camera today, unfortunately. I did my hair and everything for you folks. Right? Long like Donkey Kong, Alex O said. I knew he'd catch that one. Good stuff from D Jenny. Does that mean we already went over that? Hello, Aaron. Just cover it. That's a name, not somebody yelling at me saying gang. Good afternoon. I got rinsed this weekend. Do you think this coming month will go down more? I'm just hoping not to miss the major pump up. So my overall thesis is that that area I just highlighted, if we hit it, which I still think is likely, 88 to 93K Bitcoin. I think that's how we resolve this range at the moment, at least, right? This is something I'm not trying to get too predicty, but if I had to, water gun to my head and somebody was asking me what I thought, I would say that the market comes into that region below us, whether it's in the first week of July, whether it's this week, right? Uh, and we shark to 5.0, which is something we haven't seen for a while, right? And the reason I lean that way, I guess, more than anything at the moment. And once again, I can't just blindly lean like into that where it's like, all right, blindly along the farm. If we come down to those regions, this is something where we have to realize that the context is going to be key at that point. But when I look around the market, and this is just me as the contrarian, right? And if we come into these regions, it's gonna definitely be tied to the news. And just looking at the most recent drops and pops. I mean, it's been the same thing, right? You came up, we've got right into these highs here. You had extreme bullish news. This move here would have never seemed to, like it was going to happen, or there was no reason to think this would happen as far as the fundamentals would go. But the technical lineup here did set that up because this was also a shark. All right, this was literally just in January there, and traded this pretty perfectly as well. Pre Pre-established it, right? Pre-established it, I guess, pre-targeted, whatever you want to say. And we came down in the beginning of replay all wonky. There you go. Came down and took this low right here. Same thing. Had that run up. Three major targets. Boom, boom, boom. Target area. Obviously, we dipped a little low. It's not the end all be all, but this was that shark area there, and that was all three targets. We had a shark last year, right at the all-time high at 72,000. All right. These things are nasty right at the highs. So right here back at 72,000 in March of 2024, you had another one right there. You can see here we zero point 0.5 is the first target. You lose that at straight to 886, then you're 113. Not that it's the end all be all low, but that essentially was our low before we went up. And now we have another one. And the only thing about the one we're experiencing now is that even this one was March. All right, this one was pretty lengthy. One in January was pretty small. It was like only a month long to form it. Okay. What we pulled off here is 4 months, from start to finish, essentially. It was perfect as far as timing goes, right? That's why you'll note I have end of May right here. This was when we were targeting or we were trading all the way down here. We were targeting the completion zone end of May, which was the 22nd. So that was perfect as that would go. So far, this is a really, really valid setup, in my opinion. And because it took 4 months to form, it's probably going to take 1 to 2 months to get to the target areas, right? It takes a lot of time and makes everybody get really impatient. But my idea here has remained, and I formulated this idea when we were trading in this region here. It'd be that we would shark 5-0 and go, right? And can't guarantee that, but at the moment, that's what I'm looking for. And the reason being is I just think that would just set everybody up. Um, everybody's gonna how big can you imagine everybody's gonna be if we start dropping below 90K. You're talking, it's 2025, 4-year cycle. The news is super bearish around these areas, and just to get ran it right back. So that's what I'm looking for at the moment. Can we lose that and just continue, just straight up drop and go into the bear market? I guess that's always an option as well. But for now, that's how I'm viewing it. At the end of the day, I feel like we're just in a huge ass range, right? That we were in just 2 or 3 times, even as of recent, including last year. Oops, give or take in this little area here. And even this, honestly, just looking at it, right? Like we got just the overall range we've come up into since November. These ranges just wreck everybody sentimentally, financially, right? If you're not able to kind of go with the punches on this, it's really, really tough. But just looking at this, just the low side of this even, right? Without a time base, without looking at like the 6 month or 3 month or whatever, just looking at the structural range of this. Uh, the low side comes in right at 90K. So we've deviated at the highs here to come all the way back down, deviate at the low, that 88 region. And once again, that might not be the exact low if we come down. You might wick through it and what have you. But that's where I'll be looking for the strength to re-establish in the market. Yearly open is going to be a big one to get back above. Early sign of strength is going to be just holding and or reclaiming the range low, aka 90,000, which is psychological number at that point. Um, But yeah, that's how I envision this is shark 5-0 and go. 135, 132 is my next major target for Bitcoin. Obviously, I anticipate the altcoins to do well at that point as well, right? It's just getting through these ruts. All right, what are we looking at there? So short term here, look at this. We'll look at some altcoins, right? Get done with this really quickly. But claiming the weekly pivot right now. So like I said, really do imagine we'd see the NPOC above us at about 104,000. Let's just look at where the CME futures, that's what I was looking for, if there is one. Looks like we just filled it right now. It's like 103-ish. Never really know exactly where everybody likes to measure those from, if it's wick or body, but either way, both of them has been filled here. If you're looking on a CME futures gap. Right, like if you were looking at it, it would have been even from the body to where we opened, give or take 6. Yeah, opened up down here. Anyways, so that's been filled. All right, let's look at some altcoins. What do you guys want to see? All right, what's the coin best value right now? Avalanche or Link? Got to touch on ETH quickly, and then we'll move to what you guys just said. Got this little pullback here, right? Finally took the lows here. Really would like to see this reclaim this region, but if we're going to see Bitcoin dropping lower, I got to imagine we see ETH come all the way back down to the gold pocket. So once again, if anybody's looking for the freshest entry, the ideal area to get involved in DCA or anything like that, we front ran my $3,100 level by 7.5%, $3,000 by 4%. Once again, I've been targeting ever since we made that low here. So off by 4%. Another great example of not trying to get exactly the exact levels, right? But this, even with this being said, I've covered how, once again, things like this, things like XRP, something that's pumped over 100%, it's very natural to retrace into even just a gold pocket retracement before continuation. It's very healthy. We've had a really nice, just pretty much up and to the right run here, and coming back even to 1900 wouldn't seem great, but overall, you'd still be putting in a higher low. We'd be looking to hold that for the continued move to the upside. Okay. Uh, at that point, I would not be looking at 3100 is still going to be a huge crucial point to look to. Um, but the way if we come into this now, I'd imagine we actually break that and then look for that next move higher. And this is pretty much the region that I'd be looking to flip for a run at the highs. But I wouldn't say like totally just blindly hold through it. If we get up to this region, it's still going to be a big take profit area. But now looking at Bitcoin, I was really hoping to see ETH push up to this region before we got the shark drawdown. When you're on, like, once again, you're talking 4% was missed. But my idea was that we'd run up with Bitcoin, you get the shark targets, you come back into either this region or this region, and when Bitcoin hopefully catches a reversal, we're around there for the next move up. So at 1900, similar to Bitcoin, it's a nice psychological level. It will really hurt to get down to that region. It's probably like a 40% drop overall, about 35% if we get it. And it's painful for especially anybody that's entering here, right? Everybody always asks, especially more in these areas, it's like, oh, is it a good time to buy? And I generally say no, or I wouldn't. Granted, even at the time when I'm targeting higher, it's not like when you're up this much, the risk is still very much so that you can pull back pretty hard. And you're manage your position way differently than me. I'm here, and yes, getting a $35 or 35% haircut in the Ethereum price action there is still not the best, but it's, to me, I'm not as, I'm not underwater. I'm not looking at this in a negative fashion as somebody who got in here and then is down immediately 35%, right? So it's really crucial to have patience and wait for these key level and areas and opportunities to arise. I always recommend buying on a red day. Don't ever get involved after huge pumps. Even the idea here is that we'd still look to go higher. You just have to, at least for me, I'm willing to miss out on that 20% rise to not eat a 35% drawdown. Right? So that's how I would approach it there. Chainlink and Avalanche. I haven't looked at Chainlink in a hot minute. Avalanche, I know, has been just blowing and going. All right. Avalanche is honestly, if Bitcoin, well, that'd be a huge drop. That'd be like what, 50, 60%. That'd be a really big one. Um, Assuming Bitcoin drops, once again, another 15-ish percent if we did. Uh, yeah, Avalanche is like in a place where this is the hard part about some altcoins, right? We're pretty much at the lows. So this is one of those times where if for me, I'm anticipating a sizable move higher as we run this summer, at least on Bitcoin. Is that going to equate to the altcoins? It doesn't seem like it has so far, but I do have faith there. But it's just something you got to be willing to put on some risk on. You've got some big key levels here. We've already ran it back to the macro 382, and then we retrace, which is a pretty common thing we see in almost all these altcoins. We get these really nice pumps up. We front run the gold pocket or anything like that. Really don't do anything, of material, because realistically, if anybody's been in from higher, I mean, this is just, even though that's a nice rally, if you bought the lows, 750%, still nowhere near where it's been, and all that good stuff, right? So it's not as attractive to the holders long term if you're buying this huge rally up. But this is a very technical move. We see time and time again. You get the lows over here, you get the run up to the macro 382. We pretty much retrace that whole move, and then you consolidate again for the next move up. I would say that the ideal level to get Avalanche at, like, I was just like setting an alert and looking for the best opportunity at this moment. I would say it's gonna be 1090, but that's a big drop. It's like 40% from where we are, and wouldn't be a I'd almost love to not see the market get another 40% drop, but once again, I can't control it. But that's just, yeah, this is one of those things where I'm looking for maybe 1090 or vice versa. if Bitcoin comes to 88 to 93 and I'm dying to get me some Avalanche, I just pick up Avalanche at that point, right? And then once again, if it's maybe it's 15% lower, we take out these lows. Maybe we don't even see this anyways, but if I'm waiting for that 1090 and it never comes and I miss the opportunity here, that's kind of the thing I kind of want to point out, right? And these are all more so higher time frame ideas right now. This isn't really a short term outlook by any means. We're also once again coming into end of a 6 month, end of a quarter. This is a really good example here. This was last quarter's pivot, right? So we started off this quarter with this average, and this was a relative, target for the Q2 of this year, exactly where we topped off. This is actually the quarterly pivots were pretty nasty across the board, right? Even if you look at pretty much everything. I think Solana ran it to the quarterly pivot before pulling back, if I'm not mistaken. We have some sharks that we were looking at. But yeah, quarterly pivot, boom, front ran the first target here by just a few percent, but the quarterly pivot held it down. So that's our average of price from last quarter, likely we met this quarter. Ondo was the same way. Like pretty much everything. I think even XRP, like it was right at all the highs were pretty much the quarterly pivots. Oops. Yeah, look at that quarter pivot, boom, rolled over. I bring that up because when we're looking at Avalanche now, and let me see where Tau actually just hit. Tau did hit the. So this is actually a really great example of what I am looking for on Bitcoin. So this is the same setup. This is the shark. This is actually a bullish version going into it, and then you push up, and like I said, there's targets that come with this 0.5 fib. If you lose it, 886, 113, right? In Bitcoin's form, we were looking at a different the bearish version of this, where the targets were all below, and I'm looking for that 0.5, right, to see if we catch a reversal there, and it actually reverses. It turns into a 5.0. That's pretty much what we got here on Tau. We had this bullish shark right here. 5 spot is our major target. This is a huge TP. This is an area where you got to consider that if we don't get through this, right, we could very well roll over, and that's where we turn into the 5.0. 5.0 targets are now down here. I was looking to hold the quarterly pivot as my last little line of support here for that to get invalidated. And it still can. If we reclaim this region, then all right, things shift back higher. And then if you start closing a daily above this, it's straight to 886 after that. But until then, now we got to anticipate that we're going to come lower. Not an end all be all. For this reason, it would be more so down into this region here. I don't think we might not get both of those setups or both of those levels hit. May only get the 886, which is in line potentially with Bitcoin dropping about 15 more percent, right? So that's 15% Bitcoin drop, double that for the altcoins, right? That's where I'd be looking for a fresh entry on Tau here, especially if I miss this rally, right? So that's where I'd be looking to kind of scale in and then for the move up. But that's exactly the setup that I'm looking to see if we get on Bitcoin. You get this move up. Once again, this is the reverse version. And then you catch the reversal at the 0.5 spot, right? And then continue lower or continue higher in Bitcoin version. All that to go back to Avalanche and look at where we may go as we come into next month, right? So once again, coming into the new month, it is going to be what, Q3. Generally, Q3 is not very explosive, but sometimes they are, right? So we've had a pretty decent Q2, and when a lot of the price action is dropping for a quarter straight, the next time, the next quarter, we have new range data and averages above us. So a lot of time we snap back pretty quickly, right? So let's just see where the 200-day EMA is too. Okay, above us. It's honestly not a great look right now, but take a look at our new quarter. So we'll go back to those EMAs real quick. All right, so 200 EMA is pretty much coming in right at the high of the quarter, right? So this is more so like a little little higher time frame, but a midterm, I guess, at this point, because I'm sure once again people are asking for the more higher like end of the cycle type of predictions and targets and everything. And while we can do that all day long, done in the past, some hit, some don't, some hit, most don't. I guess is really what the to go off of. Really rather just take it, kind of step by step here, but do realize that yes, we're at the lows. So one of two things here is either, if you're already holding, it's tough to let go when things are at the lows here, and obviously, could always go lower, unfortunately. But in the grand scheme, even looking back here, we had all this up and down, and then you had a 750% rally, right? Even though we ended up giving it all back, and that's why you have to take profits along the way, stash cash for a crash, scale back in, DCA, whatever you want to do. Um, I think that we're in the same predicament here where you might fluctuate 20, 30% here in these lows. But ultimately, we have a good amount of things still highly above us. And even just pushing up, uh, back to 2024's high or, come back and tag this quarterly and still not even make a new high, just pushing back up to this region. It would be like a 200% rally if we see it. We do see those pretty often when we get the altcoin pushes, right? We got one right here last year, pretty much about 200%. So there are some big targets above us, and as well as I think a big harmonic potential. Yeah. Um, this is very high time frame, of course. So this is just a what if scenario, but this is something that for me, if I'm scaling into avalanche down here, I'm looking more so to take it up to these levels and TP a bit, let some things ride potentially, and then this would be an ultimate target that may not even hit till like August of 2026. If you can see the time frame down there, this is a total a what if scenario, right? It's not you can't really marry this by any means, but this is how I would start to manage this position if I was looking to get interested in, if I had whatever reasoning via technicals or fundamentals, and then I would start to take this up, into these regions here, and then see if we do get this, potential area here as we come into. So that is a bigger picture setup with big milestones in between. That makes sense. And then just kind of looking at it short term as we're like looking at June and I'm sorry, like July of this month, July of this year. Uh, Current quarterly range, we're trading below the 2024 lows, right? So uh, if Bitcoin drops a little bit more, I assume we'll come take those lows again, and just, we look for the push up. 200-day EMA is sitting right at the low. Sorry, that's a 200 out. 200 days actually at the high side of the range. So that's going to offer up probably some resistance here, but uh, I'd say we got a likeliness to run this range in the next coming months. All right. So even just a 30, 40% push and then kind of reevaluate, look to flip that 200-day EMA is one thing to kind of get back above. Quarterly pivot. This is for this quarter. So we'll have some new averages to look to there as well. And then if we look at like a 6-month window, and this is something where if we're looking at a 6-month range, we look to potentially run it over a 6-month window too, right? So it's not something we, just can assume will happen overnight. December. All right, it's not much bigger actually. So this is our 6-month range that we'll be able to look to as we come into next month as well, trading at the low as well. So these are the areas where I tend to put on risk. Once again, as anything, you got to be willing to go a little underwater at times, because timing the exact low, getting the exact bottom is pretty close to impossible. Getting near it is what I tend to do or try to do, obviously myself. And yeah, so that's what I'd look to here. Point of control for the 6-month window is sitting at about $21. Right. So even if we dropped a little lower here, ideally you're looking at, sweeping all the lows, get in at that region right there. Like I said, this is probably like 20% in line with if Bitcoin comes down to our shark target, right? That 88 to 93. Um, I'd run right over back to Avalanche. This was one I'd like to get into, look for the sweep of the lows, close back above, and then once again, look to run this range. We could take this range really, kind of simply 30% potential, 50% potential, look to flip out of this, get above the 200-day moving average, and then we start looking to take it up higher, scale out it, basically scaling out along the run up would be the way to do it. That's what I'd be looking for in avalanche as we come into the next coming weeks here, and we're at the lows. Boring, could go lower, but this is where the risk at least is potentially worth putting on, right? So, chain link somebody asked about. Check the comments real quick. Paul Wall, the people's champ. Matthew Fiesel says, "Thank you, broski. What's the coin? The best value?" Oh yeah, Avalanche Link. We're doing that right now. Um, Thank you, sir. D Jenny from the blockchain is got to be one of my favorite names today. How do you find the quarter pivot? It is a average of price. It's the high, low, and close of whatever time frame, daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, so on and so forth. Generally, each of them tend to be met in the following session. So when you're looking at the weekly pivot, which is the average of last week, it's likely to be met this week. The quarterly, last quarter, likely to be met this quarter, so on and so forth. Daily, monthly, so on. Um, there are many indicators. I think the one that I use right now is not available anymore. For some reason, I tried to share it with somebody, but I think there's other ones out there. Uh, but yeah, otherwise you could do it literally by hand too. Just it's a little more lengthy. All right, chain link. Ba, 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 ba. I always tell myself I'm going to reorganize this list, and I always don't. So bear with me on that. Okay, chain link. Not that this is a macro 382, but a very, very similar setup right there, right? That we were just looking at with Avalanche actually. Had a really big run up recently. Bob. Let's see if that was the macro 382. I think it was actually closer to the gold pocket. Okay. Yeah, Chainlink, when we're trading up into these regions, the same things apply, right? There are times in the market where, at least for the bigger picture, even actually the smaller picture, even the small time frame, honestly, taking it into a day trade, you don't just like wake up at 7:30 or 8 o'clock, or even 7 or 8 o'clock at night, and whenever you just pop onto the chart or pop into your trading account and just like blindly buy something, right? Generally, you want to have a reason behind the areas that you want to get involved at, be it a trading strategy, back tested strategy, uh, something of note, right? You see a 40-50% pullback and you're like, all right, that's something I'm worth getting in on after we saw such a rise. You come down to a gold pocket. There's got to be something that an entry trigger that kind of is there, right? It can mean a lot of things for many different people. Okay, not everybody's going to trade the same, invest the same, all that stuff. But generally, you want to, once again, you don't want to be buying up these big rallies, and you might have to wait weeks before you get to the key levels that you want or that you should be looking at. Sometimes they even go a little deeper, but in that case, if you're coming in at least a discounted area, you're not looking at huge downturns at that point, like coming in right at the highs. Um, and vice versa, right? So obviously we had this huge range down here, big, just like pretty much. I always refer to Theta and XRP. They had pretty much the same setup. We ran it out. This was a yearly pivot at the time. So talking on those pivots again, this was an untapped average from the year before, and ran right into that. Got a pullback. Okay, got another run up here, and ultimately, when we were trading up in this region, we were closing out. Yeah, we were closing out the year. So very similar to what I'm doing now. I'm making my rounds because we're closing out new uh, time windows, right? So we're closing out 6 months. We're closing out three months, and those time frames and those trading averages and everything like that. Think about the institutions and everything in the world. They're running off balance sheets. They're reorganizing their positions, and they do the same exact thing. They're not coming in and buying highs. They're waiting for the retraces as we come into the new quarter, and the news cycle and the price cycles all run together, right? The news is exciting and doesn't seem like it'll come down. Slowly starts getting a little scarier, 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 scarier. It gets very scary around those lows. Um, that's when you want to be picking it up, right? Unfortunately, people are coming in at the very exciting part. They're dumping it as we're kind of coming into lows. They're not rebuying here because they're going to wait for lower at that point. Uh, it's a battle, right? It's not easy. Investing and trading is not easy by any means. Um, but looking for those key regions, I think, is important. So all that to say, when we started off this year in January, we had this huge run up. Right? What was it? Just a local 200% run. And at the time, all this right here, this box, I haven't even looked at this in a few months, honestly. Um, this was the box, though, that if I was looking for fresh entries at the time, this is the one I was waiting for. All right, it was a quarterly, that point of control we were discussing before, where we're talking about the time frame or the structural base that like after it closed off, the untapped point of control. It was a quarterly one. It was a 6 month point of control as well. There was a untapped quarterly horizontal level here. We had a untapped 6 month level. We had a monthly NPA. Everything was kind of stacked in this region of all those levels when we're trading up at this area. So had we even continued up, if I was looking for a fresh entry at this point, it would have just been one of those times where for me personally, I'd be like, all right, well, then Link's just going to run without me, I guess, at that point. But if I'm looking to get involved, I wait for something like this to come back to, and I prepare for that months in advance. Once again, this was January when we were putting all this, when I put this exact update in the Traders Club Discord, and when did we get into it? We came into the exact target for, 3 months had to go by, right? So that's a long time. And there's a lot of ups and downs along the way, right? Just like we deal with right now. You get these drops and you get pops, and these are big moves. This is like 10, 20% pumps and dumps. And every pop, everybody's getting, antsy because they don't want to miss the big run. And then overall, it just keeps going lower and lower. Finally, tags that box. Is this the ultimate low? It might not be, but at the time, we had this move, and you run it up to the local 382, and that's just from local high, local low. 382 tags out. Got to be a TP at that point, right? And then either you look to scale back in on another downfall. Realistically, his think bid for Chainlink is like $6.31. I don't necessarily know that we get that. That's like once again like a 50% drop. At that point, I think the market would be in some big trouble. And it's just think bid, territory. Like, as in, like if I had to set it and forget it, and I hope it got filled at some point, like that's what I would do. But otherwise, I don't necessarily look to that level incredibly heavily right now, just because it's so far away, right? So for now, I'm going to look to what is the next most likely thing here. The Chainlink got to push. Like I said, what was this? 75% into a key level. Could we have flipped that and continued up? You can, but this is how you got to start. Like you have to view this as a big key region, and you got to scale out of it to some degree. You don't have to, I guess, but ideally you want to take some off the table. And even if that's just to reinvest it back into Chainlink to increase your holding at a potential gold pocket, right? Which we got a pullback here. All right. Boom. It was down to $12 or whatever. This was a 30% pullback. It's not where we bottomed out by any means. We got a little pop from it. But this is a strategy that I utilize all the time where I'll scale out at 382 or a key region depending. I won't always just hold out for Valhalla at this point and look to even just re-enter back 30% lower. And even if it does continue lower at that point, it's you're in a better place if you just held the entire position up to this region and then you round trip it, right? At least you increase your holdings with the back area, attempt to take it up from there. Obviously, it comes back down. That's just one thing I practice a lot. I did it a lot with XRP, especially XRP. Just 100, it went 50 cents to a dollar, just time after time for 2 years. 100% move. Everybody that was holding would just kind of be holding their breath, hoping for a breakout, right back down to 50 cents. Run back up to a dollar, right back down to 50 cents. I kept selling and buying like 50% of my holdings each and every time, just doubling my holdings. And I managed to hold it for the majority. And on the last one, even up until about 270. And had I not, though, had I sold it at the $1 mark before it broke out, then I was just, once again, I would have been okay with it running off without me. There's literally millions of other opportunities in this market. But I also quadrupled my holdings versus somebody who was just blindly holding the entire time. That's just like a little emotional factor. I think when people get really attached to their investment, even if you're not attached to the actual project, you're just attached to not missing out on a move. If because you held on to it so long, you don't wanna be the fool that sells it right before a breakout, and I think that that's what happens a lot of times. That breakout does eventually come, um, but it's a long road sometimes to get there. But anyway, let's look at what the next key levels are here for Chainlink. Just gonna take this off. Gold pocket is still probably something I guess we can keep on relevantly. And at this point, really, I'll keep that on for the 6 month. Let's just take these off. Let's get a glance at our order here. Granted, it's not much price action, so I'm sure we're just pretty much chilling there, which we are. Yeah, nothing too crazy here, as far as just some local stuff. Got a new range that'll develop here, and really this year pivot is kind of our line in the sand. Like you want to flip that to get any more major upside. Yes, you'll have the gold pocket here to look to as well, but realistically, the first good, you know, green flag, I'd say, if we see a move up from right where we are now, is to flip that $20 mark, and then probably take that run up to like 38. Currently, if you're looking to like scale in and build a position and kind of manage this along the way, you are at the range low of our 6 months period here. And if you just take it structurally, I'm just going to pull this all the way over to where uh, overall where we've been trading at basically since we broke out of this range here. So all the way from October of 2023. So pretty much the range lows here as well. And 2024. Yeah, I mean, aside from, like I said, aside from the stink bid, which would just be a monster, like, that'd be a monster drop. It'd be 50%, but, everything's possible. It is below the lows here for 2024. Um, that'd be something to be aware of, but I really, I'd look more so along the lines of we're at the range lows right now that we've been trading at, give or take, for the last, going on 2 years almost. Even if we're just looking to take this, up into the high side of the range again, this is potentially an 80% move, right? And then for there, we look to flip the yearly pivot. You want to take some profit around that region, just in case you just literally trip it yet again. And then at that point, you're already skin in the game from much lower. Once we get to these areas, you can decide if you want to hold on to it, get into the gold pocket, and flip that. And I think we have a run at 38 is the next really big target area here, which would be like a 200% route. There's a lot of like key levels that are like 200% away right now for the altcoins, and this is just an observation. But if we were to see a significant little move in the altcoins again, like we saw in just even if we saw the same thing we saw in November of last year, which was what right here, 200%. Not the sexiest moves I know in crypto because everybody's looking for that like 10x and looking to take all the all-time highs and things like that. But these 100 to 200% bursts, they do happen quite often. We get a good burst like usually once a year, and yeah, I think that there's potential for that, right? So even from where we are now up to like 38. I'm sorry, yeah, I guess so. That'd be a potential like 200%. Um, yeah, so that's how I'd approach Link at this point. I would say, looking for a sweep of the lows is always ideal. We're at $12 right now, so even coming down to this um, $10 mark, kind of taking out those lows here, dropping a little bit below 10, obviously would be enough to get it worked up and 20% move. So we're looking at Avalanche dropping potentially 20%, and if Bitcoin was to come down to the sharp target, that's probably where I'd imagine Link would end up about that. Just under $10, psychological level broken again, and we look for that move up. I see somebody mentioning whiff. I actually got to update this in the group too. So whiff has a major high time frame harmonic that I've been playing off of, and let me see how long this is. This is a bullish bat. All right, and it's alternative bat, so it has an extended low here that really took out the lows pretty deeply, and give or take. It took about a year, it looks like. I'm sorry, August 2024, 8 months. So about 8 months, to populate here or to, generate this setup. And, so far got a really nice push off the lows, okay, like 200, 300% depending on how you're looking at this. Huge, huge move here. I think you gotta look at it in log almost. And so far, it's just really come down right back into the gold pocket, right? So it's got a really nice rise up. Once again, not something you're looking to chase during the run. Even for me, I scaled in around this region because of another harmonic that I had in play, basically from the all-time high. Pretty nasty. And shout out to a member of the group for pretty much pointing it out. But this was a shark, bearish shark that occurred at the highs here, and then it turned right into a bat. And same thing, like you can just see how these key targets are respected. This was that point 0.5, so it's that first target of the shark. Got a nice bounce from it, won't lie. But as soon as you lose it, no gold pocket support, right to the 886. At that point, you just anticipate the 113. That's like a 90% drop just to there. And it went a little deeper. So it was pretty good. Um, didn't short it, sadly. I just got out of it around those highs. And then now just buying back in, no leverage, just a spot I trade. Obviously, it's a meme coin, so take that for what it's worth. But so far, really has done nothing too incredibly harsh here. Pull back to the gold pocket, meme coin. Probable to get a little bit more volatile, obviously, than others. So if Bitcoin does take a bit of a hit here, uh, which in theory, like if we see a pullback to like 88, 93, what could we see for WIF? Let's just look at our current. Oh, I mean, realistically, we could see all the way back down pretty much to the lows, right? So something you got to be prepared for. One of two things there, right? Is that if I'm looking for a fresh region to get involved, man, that'd be a huge drop, though. That'd be once again, that's like 50%. Not sh- the memes are so tough because memes can literally, I mean, it's already dropped like 50% right, from the high there. It's already down 50. But granted, we ran super hard. So you're inside the overall range here for this quarter. If I'm not mistaken here. June, yeah. Hmm. That's probably more like it. About 25%. Thing is, I mean, WIF could drop another 50%, right? That's just what we have to be prepared for. So if I'm looking for a fresh entry, I would say around this 54 mark, which is probably like the 786 if I had to get of the overall move here. Uh, and it is exactly that. So, and that's just a simple, fib retracement from low to high there. So, point of control for the last 6 months sits right there, about 55 cents. So, if I was looking for a fresh entry, I'd begin there and then just be aware. I mean, we can get a little deeper there. So that's like in line with if Bitcoin drops down to 88 to 93, 30% from where we are now. Okay, so that's in line. Granted, once again, this is a meme that's already pumped hundreds of percent, can very well give a little bit more up than anything else, but that's what I'd be looking for that. And it's still really targeting the high side box here, right? And this is just derived from a bunch of high time frame averages, the BAT B point, naked point of control, yearly pivot, the BAT targets in general, which are the 382 and the gold pocket, along with the B point, which is an untapped quarterly pivot there as well. So a sizable move away. Front ran, not front. I guess we consider front run about 40% off of the first target there. But even that being said, right, this was an 8 month setup. So realistically, I've got to give it like at least 4 months to probably get to the target zone. And that's what April. So you're talking August. So potentially like 2 more months, right, before you're really getting past the time where we don't hit. And that's just that's not a direct science. I just generally when we see a setup like this, it's going to take at least 50% of the time to get up to the target area. So yeah, I would say that that's in line, right? If you kind of pull back maybe in the first few weeks here of July, July and August, maybe we see another altcoin push. But that's how I'd be viewing it there, right? So, and then even if we just bounce from this region and we just get another sizable push to range high, which would be like 90%. I'm just looking at the high side of this range right here. So stuff like that's what I'll be looking for come into it. But yeah, like a really good example of just kind of having to be patient for some key areas to identify the most ideal entry regions, right? So for I would never enter when we were seeing a move like this. For me, I was entering all the way down here, and I had to scale in. And don't get me wrong, I was underwater on in this spot, so I was underwater for a hot minute at times. But I was putting on the risk, and once again, meme coin is definitely one of the few that it's definitely don't invest what you can't afford to lose. But yeah, I took the risk. Was underwater for a bit, just like any other, some other major investments at times in the beginning. Um, but at the same time, I wasn't buying any of this move until we got to 90% down, right? So that's another just edge that you can kind of generate from the market. Okay. Sure. Jenny from the blockchain. I used to have a little, now I have a little. Nice. Okay. What time is it here? 3:30. That is probably where I'm going to leave it off for you folks. So if you would like any more on my trade style, any more setups, a little bit more live time, I do pretty much all these updates as you just saw in the Data Dash Traders Club Discord, which you can find the link down in the description below to the data-pro.com website. So if you'd like to join that, feel free to hop in there, come trade with us. Otherwise, I'll be here again on Thursday this week, and then Thursdays just continuing forward. So I'm doing 2 days this week, and then otherwise it'll just be Thursdays continuing on. So hope you all enjoyed this video. I know I sure did. Big shout out to Forrest here at Sistine. Big shout out to the Sin City Crypto guys. And I'll see you all in the next video. And until then, everybody, cheers.